The sun was already high in the sky when Emma stepped out of her dad's old Chevy truck, her ponytail bouncing behind her. It was Saturday, and like most weekends, she was spending the day at her father's garage in a quiet suburb just outside Houston, Texas. At only 13 years old, Emma was sharper than most adults when it came to engines. She'd grown up surrounded by the rhythm of impact wrenches, the smell of motor oil, and the sound of classic rock playing from an old radio mounted to the garage wall. Her father, Mike, was a humble, hard-working mechanic with calloused hands and grease-stained jeans. He didn't say much, but he was proud of his daughter. She had a natural knack for machines, something he had quietly nurtured since she was little. He'd let her hold the flashlight while he worked late on customer jobs, taught her how to change spark plugs, and even quizzed her on engine parts during long drives. That day, the shop was busy. A few customers waited outside, and inside, engines were roaring and wrenches clanged as the team of mechanics hustled to finish jobs. While Mike went to grab a quick lunch, Emma wandered over to a classic '67 Mustang that had been towed in the night before. It had an idling problem, and her dad had mentioned it earlier that morning. The other mechanics hadn't touched it yet. Emma, curious as ever, leaned in under the hood. She carefully examined the vacuum lines and hoses, noticing one of the clamps near the intake looked loose. Reaching into her back pocket, she pulled out a small screwdriver she always carried in her denim overalls and started to gently tighten the clamp. Her eyes were focused, movements calm and precise. She had seen her dad do it dozens of times. Just then, a loud, gravelly voice broke through the sound of the garage. "Well, would you look at that? The kid thinks she's a mechanic now." It was Carl, the foreman. A gruff man in his 50s, Carl was known for his old-school thinking and short temper. He walked toward her, laughing loudly, his voice carrying across the shop. Several other mechanics looked up from their work. Emma froze. She slowly turned to face him, her hand still on the screwdriver. "You don't touch engines, little girl," Carl barked. "This ain't a toy. Why don't you go play with some dolls, or help your dad clean the floor or something?" A few of the younger mechanics chuckled nervously, unsure whether to laugh or stay quiet. Emma's face turned red. She wasn't angry, just embarrassed. She stepped back from the car and looked down, wishing she could disappear. At that moment, Mike came rushing over, having heard the commotion from outside. He saw the look on his daughter's face and instantly knew what had happened. He gave Carl a sharp look but didn't say anything. Instead, he gently placed his hand on Emma's shoulder and led her away from the Mustang. "You okay?" he asked softly. Emma nodded, but her pride was bruised. She sat quietly in the back corner of the garage, holding the screwdriver in her hand. Carl's words echoed in her mind, but so did something else, her dad's voice from years ago saying, "Engines don't care who fixes them, they just need someone who listens." She had listened, she had understood what was wrong with that car, and now as she stared at the Mustang across the room, something in her stirred. Carl had made a mistake mocking her, and in the next few moments he was about to find out just how wrong he had been. Emma sat in the corner of the garage, quietly gripping her screwdriver. The embarrassment from Carl's mocking still burned in her chest, but it was quickly being replaced by something stronger: determination. She hadn't touched that engine for fun. She knew exactly what she was doing, and she knew Carl hadn't even looked at it yet. He was too busy barking orders and criticizing others to notice the simplest problems. She stood up. Her father, Mike, glanced at her from across the shop, silently asking if she was okay. She nodded. Then, before anyone could stop her, she walked straight back to the Mustang, eyes fixed on the engine bay. Carl, still chatting with a couple of mechanics near the workbench, saw her. "Didn't I tell you to stay away from that car?" he shouted. Emma didn't flinch. Instead, she looked up and calmly said, "There's a cracked vacuum line under the intake manifold. That's why it won't idle right." The room went silent. One of the junior techs raised an eyebrow. Carl scoffed. "Oh, really? Now you're diagnosing vehicles too?" She didn't back down. "You can check it yourself." "Fine," Carl said with a sarcastic grin, walking over. "Let's all see what the child mechanic found." Emma stepped aside. She pointed into a narrow space under the intake. Carl looked skeptical but leaned in. After a few seconds of poking around, he suddenly paused. He reached in and pulled out a short section of rubber vacuum line, dry, cracked and clearly leaking. The room was dead quiet. "She's right," Carl muttered, holding the brittle hose in his hand. One of the mechanics took it to the bench, tested it, and confirmed it was the cause of the idling issue. Another tech added, "That would explain the rough idle when the engine warms up. The air-fuel mixture goes crazy when vacuum leaks." Carl's face turned red, but not from embarrassment, more like frustration. He didn't like being proven wrong, especially not by a kid. He said nothing and walked away, pretending to be busy. But the moment didn't pass unnoticed. Mike walked over to Emma, beaming with pride. "You nailed it, kid," he said, putting his arm around her shoulders. Then came a voice from the front of the shop. "Who diagnosed my car?" Everyone turned. It was the Mustang's owner, a man in his 40s wearing a suit and holding a coffee. He had walked in just in time to hear the end of the conversation. "That be her," one of the mechanics pointed at Emma. The man looked surprised, then impressed. "Well, I'll be damned," he said with a smile. "I've had 3 shops look at this thing and none of them figured it out. Good work, young lady." He reached into his wallet and handed Emma a crisp $100 bill. "You earned this." Emma hesitated, then took it, glancing at her dad. Mike gave her a nod. Later that afternoon, the shop manager, who had been watching everything from his office, called Mike and Emma in. He offered her a summer internship, not just to hang around, but to learn, work, and grow. It would be unpaid, but she'd get her own corner, her own tasks, and, best of all, a red toolbox with her name on it. Emma grinned from ear to ear. She didn't care about the money or the mockery anymore. She had proved her worth in the best way possible, not by shouting, not by fighting, but by letting her knowledge speak for itself. From that day on, Emma wasn't just Mike's daughter. She was the garage's youngest mechanic in training, and the one who reminded everyone that skill doesn't come with age. It comes with passion, patience, and the courage to stand tall when others expect you to shrink.